So former Mayor Laura Hill. To me, you're still
Yeah.
you're still Laura Hill. I still call you Mayor Hill.
Yeah.
What have you been up to the last few months?
The last few months, trying to get another book out and starting to work on a third book. And I'm just going to keep writing until I can't write anymore, and doing a lot of traveling because I've had a lot of free time.
I have to say this author that's been awakened. I didn't know that side of you. Was that something that was kind of always concealed?
You know, it's funny. When I was very, very young, like a teenager, I thought I was going to be a writer when I grew up. I thought I had just that witty, talent with a word. And went to college and was an English major. And I think I pretty much hated everything about college except the social life. So the academics, I think if I had tried harder, I would have really gotten into writing in college, but I was just trying to get in and get out. And then went into the hotel business and never wrote anything again until I became the mayor of Southlake. And then social media was waking up and people were communicating in different ways. And I told the city they would write something for me, and I'd say, oh, I'll write it. And I started to really enjoy the writing. And then a friend said to me after my term was up, you ought to write a book and put down, what was it like? What was your experience being mayor? What were the highs? What were the lows? And I thought, yeah, maybe I'll do that, and here we are.
Well, as someone who's gotten to know you over the last 4 or 5 years, I'm happy you're writing more, mainly because selflessly I'm happy that you're sharing more.
Oh, thanks.
Also, as somebody who read your first book more than twice, this was quite the departure.
Yes.
I hate to say I had expectations. They may have been a little different, but this was no letdown. So my first question to you is, why write a book about mean girls?
I actually started writing the book in the middle of my last book. I was literally typing my journey and talking about leadership and thinking about how had I gotten to where I was today, and what had really impacted me beyond all those things that I thought someone would be interested in if they were reading a leadership book. And I've always loved working with kids. I've always sat on boards and started organizations to try to give kids a seat at the table. And I myself have really navigated both the business world and philanthropy and politics as a woman. And I said, maybe I have the platform to share with other women, especially young women, what the pitfalls are out there. Because when I walked away from my political career, I knew without a doubt that the women that had put up roadblocks, either against me or to stop me or whatever it was they thought they were doing, that there was a lot more to that story. And that made me go back and really take a look at how women treat each other in the workplace, as friends. And I started talking to people and asking them about their experiences, and I knew that there was a book there. I literally wrote the book in 4 months because it was so heavy on my heart. Yeah.
Wow. I can't say it was entirely a surprise. I remember my wife, who read your book before me, I think last time, the first one, she said something to me almost in passing. She says, I hope she touches on how women are often the biggest impediment to women in corporate. And I remember thinking,
absolutely.
So I had no idea that was.
Yeah, and I couldn't get that to really fit into the first book. I did share some stories in the first book of some of my weaknesses as I learned to either manage women who reported to me, or as I learned to report to women bosses, and some of my failings and some of my missteps. But I knew there was a lot more there that I could share, and Mean Girls shares those stories.
Well, again, selfishly, it was great to see you share some of that. And that I love the first book, and I hope it continues to do well. So one of the things that, just right out of the gate, after your last book, you talk about what made you you, and I love that. And so I was expecting this book to kind of dive into you, the politician. Why not?
I realize I'm not a politician. One of the things I firmly believe about myself is that I'm a business person. I'm a strategic thinker first. So whether I'm taking on a volunteer project, whether I've been asked to sit on a board and we are tasked with fixing something, correcting something, making something run more smoothly, that's what makes me happy. And I think for me, being a politician, I was a politician in that I was elected to office. But the priority for me was to do the job, to be transparent, to be honest, to be a good communicator, and to get along and work side by side with not just my council, but also with the staff to get great things done, to be bigger than just one person. So I didn't see a book in me about politics because I was kind of an unexpected traveler in the political world when I look back on it. I just want to get in and do a great job where there's a need.
I love that in large part because you're not allowing yourself to be defined by how the people saw you. And I think for a lot of people, that's how many people know you. Somebody who's gotten to know you. It's been great to me, our relationship. You were always supportive behind the scenes. I remember one of the first conversations you had outside of Jeff Eiler's golf, and you said, Ronell, whatever it is you want to do, I'll support you. I'll always have your back, and I found that to be true. So thank you for that.
Thanks. Well, it's interesting you say that because in my business world, in our family business, I served for many years as the chairman of our national association. And so people in my business sphere of friends see me as that person. So I find that interesting that there are groups of people that see you differently depending on how you've excelled and how you have performed, depending on what the issue is, depending on what the job. And to me, being mayor was a job. It was a job I was tasked to do. I understood the responsibilities, and I had as big a responsibility to my council members as I did to the people in South Lake. So it was important to me that the council members all felt that they were very much a part of the team.
Well, I certainly did. And I'm sure the rest of the council did as well.
Yeah.
So one thing I know about you is you have a memory like an elephant, which unfortunately that means that somebody wrongs you, you may not be vengeful. I have a vengeful streak, but you don't forget it. So I wasn't surprised. So you began with this. To the woman who hurt me, and you conclude with, I was profoundly hurt and embarrassed, but nothing could prepare me for the delight you took in wounding me. Why start there, though?
Okay. Believe it or not, that's where I ended the book. So when I wrote my first book, I struggled to write an introduction. I struggled to finish up the book. I struggled to write the back cover. I wanted to just write a book. I want to write a book. I want it to start. I want it to end when I'm done. I mean, this book ends on chapter 13. And people are like, oh, 13? Yeah. Oh, my gosh. And I said, no, I'm done. I don't have anything else to write. But when I finished the book, and I had it all edited, and I sat down and read it one more time. And I knew I had a whole weekend that I had to write an introduction, because everybody's got to have an introduction. I finished the last page of the book, and I said, why don't I just write the reason that I wrote this book? And it took me 10 minutes to write it. I literally typed it out on my telephone because it was so heavy on my heart. That's what this whole book was about. This whole book was about the damage you can do to another person when you are purposefully and maliciously unkind. And whether it's a small hurt or a large hurt, it really is the backbone of Mean Girls and how Mean Girls damage other people and hurt them on many, many different levels. And so that letter just came, it's what I would say to a person who hurt me severely, what I would say to the person who betrayed me if I sat down with them and had a cup of coffee.
I'm going to put you on the spot for just a second. How do you define Mean Girls? Like when you talk about Mean Girls, what are you talking about?
Someone who has malicious intent. I mean, I laugh all the time and say, women get, especially professional women, we get called bossy and pushy and overbearing and too ambitious, and we're emotional, way too emotional, and that has nothing to do with being a mean girl. A mean girl is someone who has malicious intent, who gets pleasure out of hurting someone else, especially, as I said in my introduction, especially when they know better, but they know that people will follow their cue. And they get some kind of enjoyment out of surrounding themselves with followers who are willing to do their bidding. And it's unhealthy, it's unkind, and we risk raising a generation of young women who think that that's okay.
Yeah. So one of the lines in the book that I lit up the book with a highlighter.
Okay.
And I had sticky notes and I just kept going back and forth. And so one of the lines, it was just one line that I had trouble finding, was when you said you grew up a warrior.
Right.
So that was, you juxtapose that with the whole Mean Girls and some of the experiences we'll talk about in a second of young ladies, many of whom were anecdotal things that happened that you were privy to. But it made me wonder. So you grew up a warrior, and people see you as this very strong person. But did you see yourself in some of the stories that you talk about later, things that didn't happen to you, but the Mean Girl stories?
Yeah, absolutely. So I discovered that I was quite the warrior really when I was writing the first book. And I think it was that fighting through the constant moving and constantly making new friends and, missing out on birthday parties and sleepovers because either people didn't know me well enough or they already knew that my dad had been transferred again and we were leaving, so why invest in a friendship with me? And I wanted friends so badly that I learned to push through and to be somebody that, got people's attention, like invite me. And it's sad when you look back on it, but everyone has gone through sadness when they were a child or things that didn't work out for them. But I think, then I think as I told the stories in the book, what I would say to you is a lot of the stories I told are stories that mothers shared with me or fathers shared with me over the last 15 years. And that's what those are the stories that resonate with me because I could relate to how their child felt because I felt like that when I was a little girl. So maybe the answer to that is because of how I grew up, those are the stories that touched my heart. And so that's what resonated with me.
Throughout, you talk about mom, and I know being a parent and you've done a great job. You have 3 awesome kids. You talk about the parents, the mom's role, certainly the mom's role with the daughter. And I just kept feeling like as I went through and then back through that you were trying to advise. It was like a cautionary tale, like here's what happens if we don't kind of get in front of this.
Absolutely.
Or if we don't enable this. I certainly feel like you stopped short of indicting moms, for perpetuating this. But talk a little about what you think moms can do to help prevent, the culture from continuing of Mean Girl.
I hate to say it, but I think 90% of it is on our shoulders, especially when it comes to our daughters. Being a parent is a huge responsibility, and people don't like to talk about that. For years, women, as we were entering the workforce, we were like, let me in there too, let me climb the ladder, I want to be a leader, and something had to give. And I think if we were honest and we looked back, I've said it a million times, people say you can have it all. I don't believe for a second you can have it all. Something has to give. And so the primary responsibility of mothers is to raise their daughters to be good, empathetic, kind-hearted women who are sure of themselves, can express their feelings, but we've got to get away from this, I see things my way, and so that's the only thing that I'm willing to talk about. Mothers have got to, we've got to do a better job, and that's not in an indictment that every mother isn't trying to do her best, but sometimes our best isn't good enough. And so I hope the book shares as you said, cautionary tales of watching out for the way you resolve certain issues with your daughter that might give her the wrong idea. We don't want to raise selfish daughters. We want to raise tough daughters, but we don't want to raise selfish daughters that are unkind to others.
Oh, I love that. Having 2 daughters, something that's always resonated that my wife Rachel says is you can have everything, you just can't have everything at once.
Yes.
And I think she says that because she learned that later, but it's something we try to impress upon our daughters. You can't be everything to everyone at any one time. And you talk about takers in the book, right?
Yes.
And that's something we know. I'm currently an elected official, and you've been one as well for a lot longer than I have. And it takes, there's always people who want to take, and they don't want to, they're not filling your bucket back up. And so you have to be mindful, because often what happens, and you talked about this so well in the book, is these people go from person to person, and they're just robbing you of what energy and time that you have. why tap into that? And now, before I have your answer, I love that you went into that, because I think it's very important for girls to understand that it's okay to say no. Right? So talk a little bit about that.
So I talk a lot in the book about boundaries, because I think and I go back to mothers. Mothers have to teach their daughters at a young age about boundaries. And boundaries are a myriad of things. Boundaries are just saying no when you don't have the time to do something. Because what ends up happening is we raise our hands. We want to be included, right? We want to be in the in-group, or, even as mothers at the PTO, I found my hands going up way too many times, because I wanted the moms to like me and say, oh, Laura, she's a go-to person. But I think what we've got to do with our daughters is really teach them that being able to say yes and give the best of yourself to the things that fill you back up will help you in the long run find the friends that you need and the right kind of people that you want to hang around. And if you feel like you're overextending yourself constantly to either get attention or to be liked or to get to hang out with a certain person, what you end up with is a lot of people that only like you because you always said yes, or you always bring the snack, or you always bring the sodas, or whatever it is. And as we grow up, it's the same thing. Who's going to bring the centerpieces for the event? Who's going to get there early and set up the tables? And next thing you find out that you're always saying yes, and no one's there for you when you need help. And I think we can all take a look in the mirror. I think we've all been guilty of that.
Something that helped me was last year, I for whatever reason, we were on vacation, and I realized that I had 1,045 days until both daughters were gone.
Wow, yeah.
And it just really, really ordered my steps. And then I listened to a podcast a little later, and the guy said, up until you're around 40, say yes to everything, but after that, say no to everything. So he had this thing where he says there's buckets, right, where there's the need to, must, but throw away the shoulds. And I think that's just something. So for me, having two daughters, one of which just started college, I thought it was so important for you to write a book like this, having had your experiences, and then you could look back and say, okay, here's the things. You didn't say it in this way, but here's how it could be done. There's more than one way, and you just touched on that a little bit. There's more than one way to do it. Just because somebody's telling you, how to do something doesn't mean that way will work for you.
And learn to value value yourself in that. I say over and over again that your treasure and your time are just as valuable. So there are seasons in our life where we don't have the money to give, but we have the time to give. If you asked me tomorrow to come out and, grill, 150 hot dogs at a philanthropic event, the first thing I would say to you is, can I write a check? But for most of my life, I would say, yes, I can't afford to give money, but I'd like to be out there and support. And we're not teaching our daughters the value of their time. And so if they value their time, they're going to give their time to the places and to the people that make them feel good as a result. And that's how you build friendships. You don't build friendships by constantly saying me, or I'll do it, because then you end up being the go-to person and never the invited person.
So I'll give you credit here again. Something you told me was, never say something bad about somebody, right? I remember thinking, wow. She said, and your words were, people in Southland don't want to hear you saying bad things about other people in Southland, even if they don't like that person, right? They don't want to feel like, you be that type of person. I thought that really had an impact on me. And so one of the things I've kind of adopted as kind of a mantra is just doing things that bring people together. So how I say it is, what can we all agree on? And one of the things you talk about in the book is an almost automatic divider is politics, right? And I thought that was great, because it's not like you're Pollyanna-ish, where you say, okay, you just find ways to, not be a mean girl. Things are going to work out for you. Like, okay, there's some things that are going to automatically, divide the herd. That's going to, kind of put you as an outlier.
Right.
Talk a little about why that was important for you to share, because again, as an elected official, politics is an automatic divider.
Yeah. So I grew up in a time when you didn't talk about money, how much money you made, you didn't talk about your religion, and you didn't talk about politics. And obviously you did talk about it, because you find like-minded friends and things come up. And having been someone who worked polls for 25 years and was the president of the Young Republicans in college, and obviously I had tried my hand in politics too. But What I realized is that if we divide ourselves right off the bat because of politics, we're cutting people out of our life. And again, what I'm really trying to look at is our young people, as they're going out to college, as they're going out into the workplace, and they're trying to build a support system of mentors and colleagues and people that will help them get to where they want to go. Too many women make the mistake of thinking that every girl they meet is going to be a girlfriend. And how do you pick and choose girlfriends, and how do you get close to someone? You talk about those things. And some of those things, especially politics right now, can become a big deal breaker for a lot of people. And so you risk learning from people, because not every setting is the right setting for every discussion. If I'm at a political meeting, yes, we're going to talk about politics. But if I'm out at lunch, I'm not going to challenge the people I'm having lunch with about their politics, because what do I do when I find out they don't agree with me? Do I get up and I leave the table? I may have missed an opportunity to make a connection on a completely different level, something that would help my business, something that would help me writing. I think we are setting our kids, our young people, up for failure if that's how they're going to define friendship. And I tell several stories in the book of women that I know of, acquaintances, that have lost long-standing relationships over politics. They were friends for 20 years and it never came up. It was never a problem. They vacationed together, they ate lunch together, their kids played together, and now they don't even talk to each other. So again, friendships come and go. I get that. Some friendships last a lifetime and many others don't. But we have to consider what we want out of people when we start to develop a relationship with them.
I feel like people talk about the whole big tent philosophy. I think Ronald Reagan made popular, and I feel like we've just gotten so far away from that. It's like, how can we bring people together? I think in some circles, the whole community building doesn't make sense. It's kind of a pejorative, and I'm like, oh, who wouldn't want to build as big a broader community as possible?
I do not understand the hatred. That is what's been very shocking to me. I feel that there are priorities: living in a safe community, great schools, of course, lots of philanthropy and opportunities to grow your business, opportunities to give back to the community. Where are you going to learn those things if you only surround yourself, as you're raising your children, with people who say 100% of the time the things that you agree with? Because it gets to be a slippery slope when you are judging people by every single word that comes out of their mouth. Because the chances of them saying the wrong thing at some point, especially people that are willing to put themselves out there. It's one thing if I'm going to sit at home in my, on the sofa and watch Netflix all day long. I'm not going to risk getting myself in much trouble with what I say and what I do. But if I'm going to be out there giving back to my community, the chances are I may say or do something that you don't agree with. And I'm not going to live my life scared of that, because at the end of the day, I think there are things that rise above, and I think being a good, ethical person, being a community builder, I think those are very important things.
So I love how you finished the book with the 4 tips. I think that's great. I mean, we live in this how-to world. People want to be tactical. I think you have a great strategic message. You had the perfect peppering of anecdotes. At the end of it, when I went back the second time, and I was like, okay, what is she trying to get across here? Like, what do you want people to walk away from after having read this book?
I think the most important message is to take a look at yourself and how you are living your life, and what examples, as a mother, what examples are you setting for your daughter? Because your children see how you act, whether it's in a restaurant with the waitress, whether it's the bank teller, whether it's whether you choose to yell at the newscaster when you're watching the evening news, how you treat other people. And I remember knowing a family, it's so interesting to me. I knew a family years ago, I didn't write about it in the book, but the mother was always angry at someone, always. And people don't understand, when you're angry at a teacher, a coach, a friend, You bring that into the home, and your kids hear that all the time. And when you're constantly fighting battles for your children, which I can't talk enough about that, we are in our children's business so much that our children don't learn how to take a small slight and deal with it. They don't know how to handle getting their feelings hurt. Are there times parents need to step in? Absolutely. But the majority of the time, parents are stepping in at the wrong times. You can't force another child to be friends with your child. So I think we are smothering our daughters, and at the same time we're sharing way too much with our children, whether it's family finances, whether it is being, like I said, being critical of teachers and coaches. So this family, I never knew this mom when she wasn't fighting with someone, and now her children are grown and her children fight with everyone. And I remember getting a call from a principal at CISD, and he said, it was back when we were doing the SPARK programs, Students and Parents Against Risk to Kids, and he said to me, could you please do a program for parents about sharing too much? We've got kids in the counselor's office crying. This was 2008, terrible recession. Kids in the office at school crying because they heard their parents say that they're using the college savings fund to pay for the mortgage. Like, who's having that conversation in front of their child? I mean, this is the thing, is we're talking on the phone in our car, we're talking in the grocery store on our phone. Little kids are sitting there just soaking it all up, and they don't understand that our anger is here today, gone tomorrow. They pick up on the negative, and they see that there's always got to be a fight to get what you want. And that's how we raise mean girls. And, you know, one of the most important things about this book is mean girls, it's important to not raise them because they grow up to be the women we work for, that we work with. They grow up to be the women that our sons bring home as girlfriends. They grow up to be, you know, people that we work with on boards and commissions, and we need less mean girls. We need women that, if they have a problem with each other, especially if they have a history of being a friend, a true friend, to sit down and talk honestly with the other person about why they've changed, how they feel about you, or is there some way to find some kind of common ground. It's a real shame. I think women are, we're the biggest obstacle, we're the biggest impediment to each other. I think there's a lot of jealousy. Women don't like to see other women getting ahead. I think that we are newer to the workforce than men, so there's not a lot of us anyway. And let's be honest, we're still, you know, when the school calls because the kid's sick, 90% of the time they're calling the mom. And so we still have those traditional roles, but now we're trying to make a name for ourselves in either business or elected positions or philanthropies, and we are the ones that are holding each other back.
So I begin this by saying this wasn't the book I expected, you know, coming on the heels of your political race, but I also thought, who better? I got to see you in action. You was so great with kids. I wanted to model myself. I had not the approach that you had, but you were just always so thoughtful. You always made them feel that they were important, like nobody else was in the room, and that's something that really carried over. So much so that whenever I use your name in our house, to this day, they always say, she's a badass. They got that from their mom. They love you. And I think who better to talk about that? Right. Kind of like reverse engineering, how not to create these things, than somebody who's so respected and not just revered, but just a lovely woman, and someone that people look up for the right reasons, certainly young women. So,
thanks. Well, and I think it's okay to be, like I said, it's okay to be a tough woman, a really tough woman, and still be a nice woman. And I think we need to educate our daughters that that's not only possible, but if you're feeling that urge, you know, if you're a fighter, be a fighter. It doesn't make you a mean girl, but there are things along the way, decisions that you're going to face that can turn you into a mean girl really easily, and you just don't want to be that, because eventually people will steer clear of you. You don't want to end up out of office with no friends, right? And, you know, I have found for myself that my friend group has continued to grow, and I think that's what we should want for our daughters and for our spouses, And we need women. Women need women in our lives, but we need healthy female relationships. And the only way to get those is to set boundaries, to be honest, to be yourself, and to own your uniqueness.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, former Mayor Laura Hill.
Very former.
And the name of the book is?
Where the Mean Girls Go.
It's a great read. You should certainly pick it up.
Great. Thank you very much, Ronna.
You're welcome.
Council member.